Welcome. We're so glad you're here at another Lightspeed livecast. We have Lisa Mabli live from Dallas, Texas. Hey, Lisa.
Hello.
All right, we're here for 20 questions, this time about building high performing teams. I am Audrey Sheary and I will be running the controls. If you have any questions along the way, find me in the chat area. You can earn one Scrum Alliance SEU and one PMI PDU just for sticking with us for the hour and learning something new. So we'd love to hear your questions along the way. We may stop a couple of times and then toward the end we'll get to lots and lots of questions. Lisa, I think I'm
Hello.
going to hand it over to you and I may pop back in, but let's kick it off right on time.
Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. If you'd like to, go ahead, put in your chat the where you're calling in from so that we have a sense of the global reach of this amazing information that we're going to share today. So go ahead and use your chat, and Audrey, you can kind of use that for your own purposes. So I am Lisa Mabli. I'm one of the consultants at Lightspeed. We and I do Agile and only Agile and absolutely love it. And one of the topics that that keeps coming up is this concept of a high performing team, right? We tend to make the assumption that Agile teams are high performing, but they're not. Surprise, surprise. There are certain things that people need in order to become part of a high performing team. And so we're going to talk through some of those things. Let me see if I can get my slides advanced. Sorry, this has just been one of those technology days. So if things go horribly awry, I will dial back in and we will get going again. So here's a little bit about me for those of you who have attended my webinars or my coaching circles or are former clients. You know that I love what I do. I love travel. I love people. I love dogs and pancakes and ice cream and pretty much every other carb that there is. But mostly I like helping people have a better day at work, to approach their jobs in a way that is healthy and valuable and fulfilling and makes them feel productive. And lean and agile are great ways to do that. So what we're going to do today is go through a couple of these concepts. These are not new concepts. This is just being presented in sort of a bundled approach. Really, I've only got a couple of questions lined up because what I would love to have you guys do is, just as you think of questions about leadership and building high performing teams, just pop them in the chat and Audrey will wrangle those, and we'll have plenty of time to ask that. So this is a combination of presenting some material, but then I'd love to also have a conversation. I have as much time as you guys want to hang out and talk to that. So that's our introduction. Hopefully you are dialed in and can see my screen. If you can go quickly to menti.com, you can do this on your phone as well, and just type in the number 6092195, and you're going to see on there a question. So we're going to do a quick anonymous poll, and this is just to help me kind of see what our audience is made of. So go ahead and read those questions, and I'm going to switch my screens here just as honestly as you can. It's a slider bar. So, you know, at that far left is sort of a 0. And that would be, I disagree with this statement fully and with every ounce of my being. And then on the far right is, I strongly agree with this statement. So there are 4 little statements, and just I'll give you about a minute. So it'll bring us to about 5 past. Go ahead and just let us know. It's completely anonymous. Let us know how you feel about these 4 things. And then we'll have one other quick one after this, and then we'll get to the content.
Lisa, are you trying to stir something up with these? I'm rating here.
A little bit. You know me, I like stirring things up.
It is anonymous. We'll repeat that.
Yes. We've only got 11 people answering. There are 46 people on the call, so we're only at about 25. Oh, 45. We lost one. We're only about. Sorry, I spoke too soon. So we're only, okay, we got 16 now.
And you do need to hit submit after you answer all the sliders. I found that out.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that. We're at 20, so we'll give you just a couple of more minutes here. Well, not a couple more minutes, just a couple more seconds, really. Okay, so feel free to continue to answer and provide your feedback. This is really just to help everyone on the call kind of see what the world looks like, right? And this is the kind of thing that that we come into with clients a lot. And oftentimes, you know, people don't ask these kinds of hard questions and or put them in this kind of stark contrast with one another. But it's very important to understand if you are a manager, super important to understand where your teams are on this spectrum. And even if you're not a manager, it's good to understand where you and your teammates are on the spectrum. So we have, you know, the number of people who feel very strongly that, you know, everybody's kind of fair to middling on all of these things, as we say in Texas. Would you completely trust your manager to define the perfect personal and professional development plan for you? In an ideal world, that would be 5s across the board. You'd be honored and proud to report to any one of the individuals who currently report to me starting tomorrow. Again, if you're a manager, we want to see that be a 5, right? So we're going to kind of help you get there so that you could answer, yes, I strongly agree with that statement. The people that I manage, you know, are in a, you know, I've helped them get to a position where I'd be happy to report to them tomorrow because I'm that confident about their ability. Trust every one of your teammates to understand others' needs as much as their own. Again, we're kind of fair to middle in here. You know, it just means that there's probably a mixed bag on every team. And this is about addressing sort of communication and empathy issues on your team. So this is another very important one for you to understand sort of what the dynamic is for your team. If you're on an agile team of any form, this is going to be key for you guys, because if you have a low number here, this means that you're probably not getting as much as you can out of your retrospectives, for example. And then finally, my motivation at work is directly proportional to how much autonomy, competence, and purpose I have. This is a very familiar concept. You guys have represented it here. This is where motivation comes from, is autonomy, competence, and purpose, and the degree to which you feel those things in what you're doing. This is a very strong message for you managers out there about what actually motivates people, because that is how and you'll kind of see how this all ties together, that's how we get high performing teams. We need to respond in a way that allows people to feel like they have autonomy, that they are highly competent at what they do, that they're trusted to do what they do correctly, and that they have some kind of higher purpose that drives them. These are the levers that you pull as a manager in order to get high performing teams. And you can see here that unlike the other ones, there's very strong, there's what we call a fat tail distribution here, which is a word that I love. But anyway, it just means it's not normal like a bell shape, it just means it's highly skewed. This is highly skewed towards the end. So thank you guys very much, all 28 of you who filled this one out. We're going to do one other quick one, and this one's going to look slightly different, but it's kind of the same idea. I'm going to ask you to rate yourself from 0 to 5, where 0 is way far below average, and then 5 is you know, way far above average. Just to rate yourself on these how many did I get up here? 7 dimensions. It doesn't matter whether you're a manager or not, just rate yourself. And so we'll give you another minute or two. We've got, again, 48 people on the call, so we'll try to get above half and see what our little spider graph tells us. Again, be honest, it's okay. This one's usually a little easier than the previous one. Again, 0 is far below average. 5 is far above average. Excellent. We have 11. 18, good. We'll give it just another little tiny bit. Okay, I see some stuff in the chat. I'm just gonna gaze over the chat. Okay, cool. All right. So, oh wow, we got 31 on this one. That's excellent. So I want you guys to notice something here. We've got 31, 2-ish people. If I put driving as one of these options, we would have seen this very far skewed to the higher end of the spectrum because everybody thinks they're an above average driver. Well, obviously, everybody can't be an above average driver because then there would be no average drivers. And so I want you guys to think of this spider graph and this way of thinking about yourself that most of us, and you can see there's not a single one on here that is far below average, right? Everybody thinks they're at least average or way better than average. So what's very interesting to me here is that demonstrating vulnerability, everybody thinks they're about average. So awesome. That's actually super good because oftentimes this number is very low. So I'm happy to see this. We are a vulnerable group. That's excellent. That may have changed now also after the past 10 months this year. So, but I think there are other things that you want to see on here as well. This is another great one to look at with your team. Are people comfortable with conflict, right? Most people on this call just feel like they're kind of average at it, like they're not particularly great at it and they're not particularly bad at it. You want that number definitely to be, you want to work on that. You want people to be better than average as far as these things go. What I find interesting here is that a lot of us feel like we're above average on self-awareness and relationship building, compassion and empathy, which is fantastic. Those are wonderful qualities to have. So focus on those things. And if you are an above average individual on all of these things, continue to build on that. And we'll talk a little bit more about building on strengths rather than trying to improve your weaknesses here in a minute. But this is great information. It's also a really great thing when if you are managing managers, to help people understand that these are important qualities that we're looking for in a manager of people. So great little assessment that you can do there as well. So let me switch back to my presentation. So give me 1 second. Okay, so thank you guys very much for taking the time to do that. And now we're going to move on to the information. I think there's, we did a whole webinar on this not too long ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Audrey. It always bears repeating. What does an Agile manager do? What does an Agile manager look like? Really the fundamental job of an Agile manager is to hire the right people and get out of the way. You've heard that a bunch before, and it's actually true. Everything in Agile kind of breaks down if you tend to be a micromanager, because one of the key concepts here is self-organizing. So your job, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to hire the right people and how to get out of the way in a safe fashion. Here's your proceed safely to the exit here. But we want to make sure that we all understand that the role of the Agile manager is incredibly different from sort of a standard project management-y old school kind of approach to things, right? Like we really do want you to be quiet and listen more and get out of the way. Your job is to support and guide and help and escalate things and remove roadblocks, develop your individuals that are reporting to you personally and professionally. That's why that first question was so important. Understand that that is a key to being an Agile manager. You are managing people, you're managing people's lives, you're managing souls, you're not managing work. We want you to, these people are your charges, right? Like you are not in charge of them. This is a great way of looking at it from Simon Sinek. If you don't know him, he's absolutely top-notch, best person in the world to talk about leadership. You're not in charge of these people. They are your charges, right? So you're there to take care of them and help them grow and learn. You can do this by individual people. You have to understand their level of competence in what they're doing and what their commitment is to what they're doing. And you have to develop these relationships in order to understand this so that you can leads different individuals in different ways. Some people need a lot more hands-on approach. They need more guidance. They need a little bit more of, I need you to do this by then, and I'll help you and support you to do that. But you're also, if they're in that area, I'm saying area because of course, we like our four squares, right? So they're over in that quadrant of low competence and low commitment, they're going to need more guidance and a little more firm hand and a little more direction. But your job is to grow them out of that quadrant into other quadrants where they have high competence and high commitment, and you pretty much become hands off. But everybody's going to fall into sort of that spectrum of this balance between commitment and competence, and you have to adjust your managerial style for that to support them in the way they need it. And you've got to start building the environment. You have to create a little microculture within your own team. Even if you don't have a wholesale organizational change, your team needs to understand that they are within a culture that is high trust, that you're there to build them up as people, and it's less about them reporting to you and more about you supporting them. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, everything we talked about in the last webinar about being a good Agile manager. But all of these concepts tie directly into question of the hour, if I can advance my slide. How do you create a high performing team? So if you guys know me from, again, my coaching circles and my webinars, I'm a little sassy. And the sassy short answer to this is that you don't create a high performing team. You can't create a high performing team. When you think about trying to create a high performing team, it's kind of analogous to talking about building a house. Like, you just have the materials and you just need a plan and you just need to know what tools to use and how to nail it together. And then at the end, you've built this thing and it's a result of your work. That's not how this works. High performing teams, the approach there is much more like gardening. You can't force a plant to grow. You can't force it to get bigger and become the end state that it has the potential to become. What you can do, however, is understand what the plant needs and create an environment with the right sun and the right water and the right pH balance in the soil, and the right timing for the planting and all of those good things. You create the environment in which that plant can grow to its natural potential. You can't force it to grow, and some of them won't. Some of them will thrive, and then you've got it right. And when you can have 4, 5, 6, 10 people, who are working together, and they are all thriving, that is your high performing team. But it is an outcome of you simply creating the environment where they can thrive and grow. And that is what creates the high performing team. You're not going to create the high performing team. So how do we start? Well, you've got to start with you. Do as much self introspection as you possibly can. Get to know yourself. Become an empathetic listener, an active listener, someone who prefers to be quiet and hear what other people are saying, hear their pain points, understand them, work on your empathy, work on asking questions rather than telling people what to do. You yourself have to let go. You have to develop your own trust in your team. And without that trust, nothing that you say or do is going to help this team grow if they feel like they're not trusted to be, and you guys all know this because you answered it, autonomous, which means they have the freedom to make decisions about the work that they do, and they're trusted to make good decisions. And you have an environment where if you make a mistake, it's okay. Like, I'm not advocating failure. We still don't like failure. That's still in the bad column. But we do know that if I do make a mistake, I'm not going to be crucified for it. And I have the ability to say, oops, I made a mistake, or geez, I don't know the answer to that. Can you help me? If you are uncomfortable with those things, you've got to start with you. So you have to understand that this takes an entirely different personality to be a manager of a high performing team. You cannot get there by telling them what to do. You know how hard it is to change your own habits, and we're all going to face that on January 1st as we all make New Year's resolutions that we're going to break. You can't change the habits for other teams, but you can tap into their intrinsic motivation that comes from autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So you have to also allow yourself to let go. And that's where you need to do a lot of work first and understand how you are holding your team back. So if you don't trust your team to report to you, If you don't trust your team enough for you to report to them, sorry, you have to work on that, because your entire job as a manager is to grow people to the point that should someone say, starting tomorrow, for whatever reason, you're now going to report to so-and-so or so-and-so, you'd be like, you know what, I'm totally cool with that because I 100% trust them. So if you are having a difficult time with developing a high performing team, it's probably not the team that is getting in the way. It's probably you. And I know that sounds harsh, and I don't mean to be mean. It's simply take a step back and look at, am I creating a garden for these people to grow and become a tight-knit, well-performing team together? Or am I somehow getting in the way of that with micromanagement, or always stepping in and providing an answer rather than letting them solve the problems and learn how to do it? So always start with you if you're struggling to develop people or develop a high performing team, because there's a good chance you're at least 50% responsible for what's going on. I am going to stop there because I've just been talking incessantly and I like to hear what people have to say. So I'm going to pause there. Audrey, if there are questions that we have from folks who are on the call with us, do let me know, and otherwise we'll move on.
Yeah, we'll kick it off with a comment. So James mentioned, rolling back just a little bit, that you had mentioned, I think it was autonomy, etc. Those
Mhm.
are leadership traits. I hire the right people for the job and then I enable them. That was a
Yeah,
great point.
absolutely. Yep. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose goes two different directions, and you're absolutely correct. You want to hire people that are okay, making decisions, and they are competent at what they do, and they do feel a higher purpose, and they're connected to whatever's going on in your organization and whatever your organization's higher purpose is. But it is also the way in which people become motivated to do their jobs, and you can kind of see how that's a sort of a, I don't know, yin yang, chicken egg, whatever. They kind of feed into one another, right? So if you give people autonomy, mastery, and purpose, they naturally develop into leaders because they're motivated and they learn and they make mistakes and they learn more. And when they're comfortable and motivated, the trust issue becomes a lot easier because nobody feels defensive. It's like, nope, I know I'm competent, and because of that, I have some confidence, and I'm okay saying, I don't know something, and all of that develops these leadership traits. So yes, you hire for leadership traits for sure, and somebody who is able to recognize where they are on the spectrum of those three things, and then improve whatever they need, is really key. So thank you for that. It's a good comment.
All right, no more questions right now, but if something pops up, go ahead and drop it in there and we'll get to it in a bit.
Great. Okay. I didn't lose anybody by saying if you don't have a high performing team, look in the mirror, but so that's really good. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. It's the flowers. You're looking at flowers, so you're all very peaceful right now. Nature does that to a person. By the way, I am not like an expert gardener. Let me just put that out there. I am pretty good at helping teams become high performing teams and learn how to do that, but I'm really terrible at gardening. But I do now have a yard that I need to learn it for. So I am discovering some of these things and finding lots of analogies with what I do. So we're taking this gardening analogy about as far as it fully can go. So if you have expert gardening questions, I'm definitely not your person. So what are good performance metrics and incentives? This is true outside of the Agile world as well, but it's also particularly true if you're working with Agile teams, if you have Scrum teams, for example. We are not big fans of individual performance metrics for people that are quantitative, right? So so-and-so wrote so many lines of code, or, has a throughput of so many stories off the backlog. That kind of stuff is really, it's pretty much going to hold your team back. What we're looking for is some of the things that were just mentioned. What we're looking for is a way in which to gauge an individual's performance based on how well they demonstrate these qualities of what a member of a high performing team needs. And you guys are probably familiar with the Google Oxygen thing. Only one of the top 10 things, and this is for leadership, but remember, a high performing team is a team of leaders. So that's what we're trying to do, is develop people into leaders. And that's how you get a high performing team. But only one of them was actually skills based. The other 9 are all soft skills. So whatever qualities, whatever values are intrinsic to your organization, or that you want to advocate for and develop in your individuals, those should be your individual performance metrics. So could be in any number of things: accountability, teamwork, compassion, leadership, empathy, whatever those look like. find some that really are the soft stuff, right? And that's how you can actually do your performance measures based on the qualities you're trying to develop in your teams. That will make them high performing teams, which will in turn lead to, you know, moving the needle on all your KPIs and OKRs and all the other acronyms that are used for those performance metrics that you want. For the team level, then, when you have a high performing team, the way to make a high performing team even more high performing is to evaluate the output of teamwork. So anything that has to do with a sprint or with delivery or with quality or with predictability is at the team level. This kind of gets rid of that individualistic behavior. This helps people understand that no, it's not about the number of cards that I move through the system in the course of a sprint. It's about how much was the team able to accomplish. And that may mean that this time I only have one card assigned to me that gets to the system, but I've helped 4 other people complete 5 cards each. So that's the kind of behavior that we want to have. And you can't get that by evaluating how many lines of code a person wrote or how many cards they moved through the system, because it's probably more important that they're helping people learn, they're helping people grow, and they're helping their team get work done. This is a great example. It actually just came up yesterday, fortuitously enough, at a client where they were putting some performance metrics in place, and this was about how many cards are assigned to devs and how much work they move through the system. And I love it, love it, love it, love it. This is when you see your coaching sort of come to fruition. One of the dev leads on the team that I had been coaching said, well, we've been encouraging devs to pitch in with QA when QA's, you know, whip is getting out of control. How are we going to do that when the cards are assigned to QA? And how is this going to impact, you know, our performance metrics? And so, you know, at that point, I just pushed myself away from the table and watch, you know, the conversation happen, because that was exactly the right response. Well, don't we want devs to help QA? And isn't, you know, counting the number of cards they've moved across the board, you know, absolutely completely counterproductive to that behavior? So you have to think about your performance metrics slightly differently. Think of the team level ones, and then think of the individual ones as a slightly different kind of ball game. Incentivizing people, again, you know, we're trying to create, look, motivating people doesn't work. There's about 5 different books with that title on there, but motivating people does not work. You cannot motivate someone. What you can do is create an environment where their internal motivation mechanisms are just naturally at play. You cannot force that, but you can certainly create an environment where autonomy, mastery, and purpose are felt by every single person every single day, or at least most of the time. Another thing that I would recommend is encourage, I don't know if you guys remember, I can't even remember when this came out. It might have been the 80s or 90s or something. It was the 5 love languages, and it was about the way we express ourselves and the way we emote carries a different message to the receiver. So some people have certain ways in which they recognize what you're saying or doing as an expression of love, and they don't recognize it in other things. So if you're the kind of person who always says, oh, you know, my expression of love for you is to pick up the groceries on the way home. And if I don't see that, because my expression of love is, I don't want you to pick up the groceries. What I want is to spend some quality time with you. I'm not going to interpret your message as an I love you. I'm going to interpret it as a non I love you. And then I'm going to be looking for that other messages. And if you're not aware that that's how I hear I love you with just spending time with you, then there's going to be a mismatch, right? And people are going to feel unloved. Well, not to let a good marketing opportunity go to waste, the authors of that framework also created one that was about the 4 languages of appreciation in the workspace. Now, there were 5 in the previous one. One of those was touch, and so they kind of left that one off the list for the workplace for obvious reasons. But there are 4 other ones. It's a great idea to understand as you're having these personal meetings with folks on your team, to understand who they are as people, to understand what their language of appreciation is. Because I can give you appreciation all day long in my language, but if you're not hearing it as appreciation, you're not going to feel appreciated. So it's very important. If, for example, I know that Audrey feels appreciated by me understanding that, she likes to sing. And so I have given her, a gift card to, some musical or something, because I understand. Now, another person may prefer that she would just rather, have some quiet time to sit and talk with Audrey. So if I, do that kind of thing and express my appreciation to Audrey by saying, hey, I'm going to take you to lunch and we'll go, she's not going to hear that as appreciation. And so she's going, why doesn't Lisa ever appreciate me? Right. Because I'm not talking to her. She doesn't see lunch with me as a value, which she would not be the first person, by the way. And so you have to kind of understand. And so you've got to not only develop performance metrics that are going to reward behavior that you're looking for, but you have to reward that behavior with the individual in a way that they actually see as a reward. So again, that was very long. So I'm going to pause and see what questions we have in the chat, or comments or concerns or anything.
Nothing quite yet. Feel free to drop in your questions there. Lisa, what's your love language?
So my love language is actually quality time, and it turns out to be my language of appreciation at work as well.
Mm-hmm.
How about yours? Do you know?
I think I'm kind of well-rounded with all of them. But to deflect that question, we have one from Brian regarding retros. Lately, virtual, of course, it's the same 2 to 3 people talking. We have 8 devs, QA, and a PO, me. Any ideas to stir things up? Quality time.
Yeah. So one thing you can do is chat with those people off to the side and ask them to shut up so that you can hear other people. Kind of depends on your relationship, right? And I say shut up I mean it in a very nice way, because I've had to learn to shut up. I speak 4 languages, but I can't shut up in any of them. So, it's just it's my own personal struggle, one that a lot of people face. So, the key there is to encourage people to stop talking, and people think, silence can be uncomfortable. People feel like if, they don't want to railroad the conversation, but they feel like, well, if nobody else is going to say anything, I might. And so what that creates is this dynamic where the people who never talk are like, well, why even bother? Because so-and-so is going to say something, and we always have a good conversation, and your conversations may still be wonderful and brilliant and effective and be helping, but you're never going to hear the input from 3/4 of the people in the room. So there are some things you can do if you have a great relationship, and I'm kind of, speaking a little tongue in cheek, but if you have a great relationship with those people, pull them aside one-on-one. Don't ever call anybody out in front of a group, and just ask like, hey, we're having a hard time getting some of the quieter people in the room to feel comfortable contributing or engaging or providing their input. And here's a little trade secret: the quiet people are usually the ones with the best ideas. I'm just throwing that out there. And so you definitely want to make sure that they're being heard. And so you can ask people to, one thing I try to do is count to 8 in my head before I open my mouth. I never get past 5, but I at least try, so that you create the space for people to, enter into that quietude and provide their opinion. So if you have that kind of relationship with the talkers, you can have that chat with them. If you don't, you can ask the quieter people, they may just be serious introverts and they're super uncomfortable, but they want to express themselves, but they're not really sure or comfortable with diving in. One thing to know about introverts is if a new thing comes up, and it's something that requires some analysis and decision making, it's super unlikely that they're going to voice an opinion right then and right there, because they have to kind of find a quiet space and then let it sort of trickle in, like your hand pour coffee, for them to come up with a conclusion about it. So you can create a board where people can put anonymous posts on things. There's all kinds of retro, and actually on the Livespeed website, we have a list of retro tools that allow you to do precisely that. So at least then they're heard and their cards are up there. You can do it anonymously. They can put their name on it. You can say, hey, Bob, I see you added this card. You want to say more about that. So if they're not speaking, then it's usually a function of not feeling safe to do so, because either somebody else is going to fill the silence, or they're just not comfortable voicing their opinion because they don't think anybody cares what they say, which may be true. If you're not able to stop talking and listen, you probably don't actually truly care what they have to say. So that's another conversation. And then the third approach is just to bring it up as a team and ask them what's going to work to help the whole team be heard during retro. So just if you have that kind of a team, just say, hey, I've noticed that just a few of us ever talk during retro, and it's super important that we hear from everybody. What can we as a team do together to ensure that all the voices are heard in the room? and the team will come up with some really great ideas about how to do that, whether it's tools or games or whatever. Yeah, does that help? Does that answer your question ish?
We'll wait on that reply. It's a little quiet in the chat and we're heading into our big Q&A section. I'd like to prompt everyone with, when you signed up for this today, other than curiosity, what was the one big question or challenge you wanted to address and you were hoping Lisa would touch on? So put that in the chat. And we do have a question from Steve. I think we're all wondering, we're used to trying to do these things in person, but
Yeah.
this year, it's completely different. So Steve is asking, are there any particular skills to develop in the more virtual environment that can improve agile leadership?
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because all of everything that we've talked about is about communication, right? It's about relationship building. A lot of times people think of a management position as very transactional. It's about, I'm in here, this has got to be done, I've got to report on that being done, and it's about the work, and it's very transactional. The better managers are relationship builders, and it's not transactional. So you're actually developing a true kind of friendship with everybody on your team. And that is super duper important. And that is much harder in a virtual world. There are things that you can do. And again, having that relationship is how you're going to build them into leaders, right? So you have to start with having the relationship so they can honestly say, hey, you know what? I feel like I'm kind of bad at this. Can you help me get better at it? And then you can help them. One of the key things that I've seen in a lot of clients and a lot of meetings I've been is video. You guys all probably know this, 95% of what we communicate is done with visual cues. So if you are in a team or you're in an organization where video is not required in your meetings, change that, because you cannot feel a connection and have empathy for an icon with somebody's initials in it. You have to look them in the eye. You have to see them. If there are background issues or you're in a witness protection program, okay, make an exception for that. But generally speaking, you have to have face-to-face communication, and being on video is really going to change how that works. There's also plenty of ways that you can, number one, express appreciation for people. There's plenty of, in fact, Lightspeed does this. There's I forgot what the company's called, but they just send you a gift certificate to like a snack place as, reward. By the way, that's probably my love language is carbs. If you can send me a dozen cookies, that 100% is my love language. But they can just express that, and there's all kinds of things you can do that way virtually. You can do, and actually we have another webinar about that, virtual water cooler. It's about that team building. It's about increasing that communication. There was some, I was chatting recently with a guy who's working on his PhD, a different one, Audrey, and his was about these collaboration tools like Teams and Sakoko and all of these tools that are in Slack. And what he found was that it didn't matter which tool you use. None of the tools was better for building teams or creating that kind of human connection, but any of them is better than none of them. Any of them is better than none, I should say. So the idea is get something started where that office dynamic of being near one another and kind of just being conscious of the fact that you're working with another person on a team, your teammate, your high-performing teammate. Set something up like that. We use Sakoko at Lightspeed oftentimes. I'm on Teams with my clients all the time. I've got like one Teams window open for one client, and I've got another window open for another client. So this is how you can do that. You're going to have to try to approximate it as best you can. But I think video is the one, it's so easy to do. And that's probably one of the things that's going to make the biggest difference for you. And then again, ask your team. Ask your team what they would like to do to ensure that they continue to build the relationships and develop leadership skills, even in an online world. And you'll probably be surprised about the things that you hear, and then work from there.
Great.
I find that it's always better to ask what people think the solution might be when the solution is going to impact them than it is to try to solve the problem for them.
I'm also going to ask for more solutions since you said that. We're going to ask a question, ask everyone to put your thoughts in the chat as Lisa answers. So Harold has a high performing team And we hired someone who seems like a great fit, but it's not really performing. So, what are some suggestions for motivating this person remotely?
Yeah, that's always a great question. Again, usually when people are not, high performing, there's something going on. There's one of those things in their internal motivation. One of those levers is not being hit for some reason. And so if you're managing that person, it's your job to figure out why and to help them get over it, get through it, or, find a better fit somewhere else. And so building the trust. So if they're new, so I will share a little story. Obviously, I'll keep this completely confidential of who was involved and when, but I did before I became a consultant. I had some folks reporting to me, and I did notice that one of the people on my team was kind of checked out a lot and was not performing in a way that I knew he could perform. And I had one-on-ones with everybody on my team always, so a half hour every week. And so I had built a trusting relationship. And so in our one-on-one, I was able to ask him, is everything okay? That's always the first question. If you see behavior that is not sort of up to what you are hoping for or are expecting, just ask people if they're okay. And I did, and it turned out that he had a tremendous loss going on in his family with his 13-year-old daughter. And so that was the entire reason why he was, not performing. He was doing the best he could while, having to deal with this tremendous family issue at home. If you never ask the question, you'll never know. And you'll just assume that they're not performing because they're just not performers. And so we were able to work around his schedule to help, help him manage his what was going on with his daughter, and that actually helped him, right? So these are the important things to get at. Remember, people are people. The folks that are working with you and for you are human beings with lots and lots of life stuff going on. And if you never ask the question, you'll never know that, and you'll just assume they're not high performers. So always ask that question. But in order to get there, you do have to build the trust first. And so that's the hard part. Yeah, people are naturally motivated to perform. People want to perform and do well. Just assume that about them.
Thanks, Lisa. We've got a few more coming in.
Sure.
Let's see. What do you think about team agreements?
Love them. Um, team agreements are great. They're obviously as long as they're considered to be a living document, because as your team grows and matures together, their team agreements are going to change naturally. I think they're a great idea. I don't like imposing them as a requirement. Some teams don't need them. I've worked with teams that have been together for 15 years and the entire team agreement was just totally up here. It was like they could complete each other's thoughts. It was just completely unnecessary. So it wouldn't have made sense to force that team to write down their team agreements because they just kind of knew it. That's not usually the case for most teams. It can be extremely helpful. And again, asking the team, hey, what do we as a team need to agree upon to, ensure that we're all playing nicely together, or, whatever problem it is that you're trying to address. I think team agreements are a great idea if it's actually going to help your team. If you're just going to waste time putting one together and nobody's going to adhere to it or look at it or care about it, probably not a great idea. But then I would work with your team to help them, get them to the point where they would naturally think it's a good idea by themselves.
All right, with that, Lisa, we're heading to the 15 minutes left mark. I know people start to look at their calendar for the next call, so I'll do a little bit of announcing now, and then we'll hit some more questions. Thanks for being here and spending time with us today. We do have a meetup tomorrow night. We'd love to see you, Lisa and I there, the DC Lean plus Agile meetup. I'm going to stick a link to that in the chat after I'm done talking here. And if you have other questions or just want to hear more from other organizations, we host a coaching circle, and Lisa leads that every couple of weeks. So I'll stick another link to the chat there, in the chat there. And
I don't talk as much in coaching circles. That's that's a lot of other peers and coaches who answer each other's questions, and for people who are maybe newer to Agile. So I don't talk nearly as much in that one, just by the way.
Perfect. And if you're looking for any kind of Agile, Scrum, Kanban training or private team training, please reach out to us. So those are my announcements. We'll go back to some more questions. And if you have to go, have a great day. Lisa, I love this question, so I'm going to take some time reading it. As someone who has been looking for a job for a long time now, I see a lot of job descriptions, and most of them, while looking for agile roles and touting agileness, remain wedded to managing work and command and control models. Why is that, you think? And what are some ways to address the contradiction with the organizations who continue to communicate in this manner?
It's I can start with the why. Also, a great book by Simon Sinek. But starting, start with why. The why that they do that is because most organizations have elements of a very standard old school, or whatever you want to call it, the sort of old school way of doing things that are already in place and are going to be very large wheels that are turning and are trying to introduce agile into areas of the business where it makes sense to do so. So likely those businesses have some things that either haven't changed or made the transition to agile, or are longer term plans to update business processes. And so I would say if you want to get into the agile world, unless you're starting at a startup, like literally there's, less than 24 people there and you can kind of have a lot more flexibility. If you're trying to get into an organization that has any kind of legs under it, has been around for any amount of time at all, you need to expect that there are going to be lots and lots of structures in place that are artifacts of an older way of doing things. So going in, I would not expect them not to have those things in place. Most of the organizations we work with are very strongly command and control in a large, bigger picture, but the small groups that are interested in changing the way that they do work tend to have less of a command and control structure. And the real skill of being an agile coach or an agilist is understanding how to navigate that gray area and thread the needle between old, clunky, heavy processes and mindsets, and helping the teams that you're on that are trying to be as agile as they can within the context. So I would say just expect that, and understand what your own limits are for that. And when you're interviewing, try to get at, like, how deeply does this command and control structure seep into this group and what we're trying to do in an agile way here? Are my hands going to be completely tied? And if you really want to make a change and do agile things and do good things with agile in an organization, if it sounds like your hands are going to be tied and you're really just kind of there to do whatever you're told to do and probably fail at it, then I would probably consider a different company. But I would anticipate that most places that you're looking for are going to have a degree of command and control stuff in place, because it's a business. That's how businesses are run.
Thanks, Lisa. We've got one more question here, and let's wrap on that one. So, what's the best strategy for handling the outspoken gaslighter in the team environment? And we'll also say virtually on that one for now.
Well, being virtual is kind of nice. If you have a highly toxic, horrible person, you can always mute them or kick them out of a call. So actually, virtual gives you some tools that you wouldn't have had if you were in person. I'm kidding. Don't do that. That's very bad. That's not a leadership quality. No. So when you're in a virtual environment, you can look at this two ways. It can be worse because the team is already much more stressed and less about being virtual and just more about the state of the world. And so that person could be becoming worse and be becoming a much more difficult thing to deal with. Or they could actually, this could be an opportunity for the team outside of that person to unify and become stronger together, because they're not in your face and just physically in front of you all the time. So you can kind of out of sight, out of mind them, and then as a team work on how that person's behavior is going to be managed. But I would again say, if you have that person, anytime you have a person who is that person, especially if you're managing them, it's always a good opportunity to just ask what's going on. People generally are that way because of fear of something, and it may be something that has absolutely nothing to do with work. So having that compassion and having that empathy, trying to understand where they're coming from and what's driving those behaviors. Again, you're going to have to build a trusting relationship with this person, which, if they're especially contentious, could be really hard. But you're not helping the team by not addressing the issue. And if it's the person's just not a good fit and needs to be let go, then that's always an option as well. And that's the crappiest part of being a manager, but it is a necessary part sometime. So have compassion for the person. Just kind of figure out what's behind the behavior, and figure out whether it's kind of a reversible trend, and if not, take whatever next steps you feel are going to be the best for the rest of your team and your organization.
Super, Lisa, that rounds it out. Thanks to you. Thanks for the time. Always love to hear your tips and tricks and advice. And I said that was the last question, but we had a good one come in from someone who has been at a lot of our events. What
Yay.
are the 4 languages you speak, Lisa?
English, Dutch, French, and Italian.
Got it. Thanks. All right. Do you want to do any closing messages from your side, Lisa?
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, thank you guys very much for spending part of your afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you might be in the world, with me. This is always great fun for me. I love hearing your questions. I love it. If I'm helpful, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you like. I'm the only one with my name. And I guess that's it. Stay safe. Have a wonderful holiday, and go be agile.
Great. Thanks a lot. We'll see everyone on the next one.
Bye-bye.